It's November 24, 1971. A man in his early 40s is sitting in the back of an airplane with a briefcase at his feet. He looks out the window, deep in thought. The plane flies from Portland to Seattle. Cooper still fascinates people today. Who was he and what happened to him? When the FBI ran the name through their system, it came back clear. After his plane landed in Seattle, he went to the airport where he picked up a four-wheel drive car. According to some sources, a man matching his description was seen walking along a highway near the Oregon-Washington border a few weeks after the hijacking. But of course, this isn't solid evidence. After all, it was 1971 and there weren't many security cameras around. But the authorities did find some clues. They looked into every lead and interviewed hundreds of people. But as the years went by, it became clear that D.B. Cooper was gone for good. In 2016, they finally closed the case. Why did it take so long? He stumbled upon some old video footage of a plane crash in the woods. The pilot said it was a Piper Cherokee 6, the same model that D.B. Cooper was flying. Plus, the crash happened near the Washington-Oregon border, which fits the timeline. However, there's no way to prove it. And that goes for everything else, too. All we can do is speculate. And at this point, anything is possible. Maybe D.B. Cooper really did escape with the money and live out the remainder of his days in some remote jungle. Or maybe he crashed in the forest and died instantly. Whatever happened, we may never know for sure. The mystery of D.B. Cooper will continue to fascinate people for generations to come. Well, it's because they had nothing to go on. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the next one. Thanks for watching. Plus, it was easier to focus on other cases that seemed more promising. But that doesn't mean they gave up entirely. Even today, they're looking for clues and following up on new leads. And who knows what the future may bring. Maybe one day they'll solve the case of the century. For example, they found a tie clip in the back of the plane that had been torn in half. It turned out that D.B. Cooper had tried to buy a new one at a department store in Portland, but he must have had second thoughts because he never picked it up. The FBI also found a crumpled napkin with a phone number written on it. Turns out that it was a wrong one. But maybe Cooper had planned to call someone once he got to Seattle. And fortunately, we may never know. And if you ask me, I think it's more likely that he did make it out alive, even though he probably never got away with the money. McCoy was an accomplished mechanic and outdoorsman. So, he drove out of Washington state into the woods where he spent several days living off the grid. Others claim he was a spy from a foreign country. But these are just theories. We have no concrete evidence to support them. But what we do know is that D.B. Cooper was a master of disguise. When he boarded the plane in Portland, he introduced himself as Dan Cooper. He told the flight attendant that he was heading to Mexico City for a conference, but that's almost certainly a lie. In fact, he could have been anyone. He may have even been a woman. After all, nobody saw his face except for the flight attendant and the pilot. And they both gave conflicting descriptions. According to the flight attendant, D.B. Cooper had dark hair and a mustache. But the pilot said he had light hair and a goatee. So, who was he really? Well, we may never know. But that hasn't stopped people from trying. They followed every lead and interviewed hundreds of people, but nothing panned out. Here's what they know about him. He was between 40 and 50 years old. He was tall and slender, around 6 feet tall and weighing about 180 pounds. He had a receding hairline and wore glasses. At the time of the crime, he was clean-shaven, but it's possible he had a mustache or a goatee. He also seemed well-traveled and spoke with a transatlantic accent. This led investigators to believe that he might have been Canadian, British, or Australian. During the flight, he drank a couple of beers and seemed relaxed. He also had a sense of humor. He was witty and charming, which made it hard for people to believe that he was a criminal. But there was more to him than met the eye. For example, when he went to the bathroom, he left his briefcase behind. Why would someone with a bomb in their bag leave it unattended? It seems like he wanted to get as far away from the plane as possible. As soon as he landed in Seattle, he rented a car and drove off. He was never seen again. Eventually, he made it to Mexico where he lived under the alias Lorenzo Van Meter. In 1980, he returned home to visit his family. But when the FBI saw a picture of him, they knew exactly who he was. Richard McCoy had done something similar to D.B. Cooper back in 1975. He hijacked a plane and extorted $240,000 from the government. However, he was caught and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Now, the question is, could Richard McCoy have also been D.B. Cooper? If so, why didn't the FBI catch him sooner? Well, it turns out they did. But McCoy was released on parole in 1990. And since then, he's been tight-lipped about what really happened all those years ago. They have no idea who this person really was. And to this day, nobody knows. Some people believe that the case may never be solved, but others say that there are a few good theories out there. One of them is that he was actually a CIA agent. Apparently, it was around the time of the Vietnam War and the agency needed somebody to travel to Southeast Asia. The problem was that he couldn't go alone. There had to be another person with him to make sure that he didn't cause any trouble. So the CIA decided to put an ad in the newspaper asking for a male in his mid-30s to accompany one of their agents on a top-secret mission to Thailand. The pay would be good and so would the benefits. All he had to do was sign some papers and he could remain anonymous. Enter Dan Cooper. Maybe that was his real name. Maybe it wasn't. We don't know. But what we do know is that he accepted the job offer. He went to work for the CIA. He was even given training on how to make a parachute land. But after a while, he started having second thoughts. Could he really trust these people? What if they were using him? So he quit. But before he did, he stole some money and some weapons. Then he disappeared. Well, there's a lot we don't know. But here are some facts about the case. The man makes small talk with the stewardess and gets up to use the bathroom. But when he returns, he has something new in his hands, a crumpled piece of paper. The flight attendant asks him if he wants some help, and he says, "No, thanks. I need it right now." He then writes something on the paper and hands it over to her. It reads, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. Do not be alarmed." He adds, "Don't let the other passengers panic or I will have to be very unpleasant." Unsurprisingly, the flight attendant immediately panicked. What was she supposed to do? This was no joke. The mystery of D.B. Fact 1. D.B. Cooper wasn't his real name. That's what he gave to the FBI when they asked for identification. Theory no. 2 is that D.B. Cooper was actually Richard McCoy. Now, theory no. 3 is that D.B. Cooper never made it out of the woods alive. What we do know is that the FBI was hot on his trail. Now, what did D.B. Cooper do with the money? Well, that's a tough one to answer. What we do know is that the FBI kept searching for answers. In the meantime, there are plenty of conspiracy theories to keep us guessing. Some people say that D.B. Cooper was an undercover CIA agent. For example, there's a guy named Joe Pishin who believes he may have found the missing hijacker's plane. So, what do you think? What happened to D.B. Cooper? Let me know your thoughts.